The funny thing is, if Albert hadn't said it the way he did, I probably wouldn't remember that night at all. Felix, can you stay for a minute after everyone leaves? That was it. Casual. Almost lazy. Like he was asking me to forward an email or lock the server room. He didn't even look up from his screen when he said it, just shrugged into his jacket and added, "Not about reports." That should have been my first clue. It was already after 6. The office had that hollow, end-of-day quiet, the kind where every sound feels louder than it should. Chairs rolling back. A printer coughing out its last page. Someone laughing down the hall as the elevator doors closed. Then it was just me and Albert. My boss. My very straight boss. My married for 10 years before the divorce. Talks about his kids like they're his religion boss. The guy who once made a point of saying, "No offense, but I don't swing that way," when a client teased him about flirting too much. That Albert. So yeah, I told myself not to be weird about it. I shut down my computer, grabbed my bag, and followed him into his office. The glass door clicked shut behind me. He took off his jacket and draped it over the chair instead of putting it on, which was unusual. Albert was a routine guy. Details guy. The kind of man who lived inside habits. "Have a seat," he said. I sat. He didn't. Instead, he leaned against his desk, arms crossed, staring at the floor like it might answer something for him. Up close, I noticed things I normally didn't let myself notice: the faint crease between his eyebrows, the way his sleeves were rolled just enough to show his forearms, the subtle tension in his jaw. Silence stretched. "So," I said finally, trying to sound normal. "What's up?" Albert exhaled through his nose. A long breath. Not annoyed. Not tired. Nervous. "I'm just gonna say this straight," he said, then paused, lips twitching. No pun intended. I smiled reflexively. He didn't. That's when my stomach tightened. "This isn't a performance issue," he continued. "You're solid. You know that. Okay. And it's not about deadlines. Or mistakes. Or anything HR related." That word HR hung in the air like a warning flare. "Albert," I said carefully, "if I crossed a line at any point dash." "You didn't," he cut in. Quickly. Too quickly. That's kind of the problem. He pushed off the desk and took one step closer. Not invading my space. Just less distance than before. "I've been noticing things," he said. My pulse kicked up. "Like what?" "Like how you stay calm when everyone else panics," he said. "How you listen instead of waiting to talk. How you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention." There it was. My throat went dry. "I don't think I dash." "I'm not accusing you of anything," Albert said. His voice dropped, lost that managerial edge. "I'm just aware of it." The room felt warmer. Or maybe that was just me. "I'm straight," he added, like it was a fact he needed to anchor himself to. "I've always been straight." I nodded. Of course he was. "But lately," he went on, rubbing the back of his neck, "I get home and you're still in my head. Not work you. You. And that's not normal for me." I stared at him, heart hammering, trying to process what he was saying and what he very deliberately wasn't. "I'm not asking you for anything," he said quickly, like he'd read the panic flicker across my face. "This isn't some messed up power thing. I needed to say it out loud before I convinced myself I was losing my mind." Another step closer. I could smell his cologne now. Clean. Familiar. Dangerous. "I don't know what this means," Albert admitted. "I just know I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening anymore." I should have stood up. I should have thanked him for his honesty and walked out into the safety of the elevator and the night. Instead, I stayed seated, looking up at a man who suddenly didn't look like my boss at all. He looked like someone standing at the edge of something he'd never planned to approach. And whatever he'd asked me to stay late for, it definitely wasn't about work. The silence after that felt louder than anything he'd said. Albert stood there, close enough now that I had to tilt my head to keep eye contact. Not looming. Not cornering me. Just present. Unavoidable. I swallowed. "You know this puts me in a weird position, right?" He nodded immediately. "Yeah, I do. That's why I almost didn't say anything." "Almost," I echoed. A corner of his mouth twitched. "I lost that fight about 3 days ago." That made something in my chest loosen, just a little. Not relief. Recognition. The kind that comes when you realize the other person has been spiraling just as hard as you have. "I'm not trying to mess this up," he said. "Your job. My job. Everything." "I believe you," I said, surprised at how quickly the words came out. He searched my face, like he was checking for sarcasm or fear or regret. Whatever he saw must have steadied him. Because he finally pulled the chair out and sat across from me instead of hovering. Can I ask you something? He said. I nodded. When did you know? I blinked. Know what? That you were into guys, he said. Straightforward. No judgment. Just curiosity. I hesitated, then shrugged. College, I guess. Maybe earlier. I spent a lot of time pretending it was just admiration. Albert let out a quiet huff of a laugh. Yeah, that tracks. You? He froze. Just for a second. I don't know, he admitted. That's the problem. I've never questioned it before. Ever. He rubbed his palms together, a nervous habit I'd never seen on him. This feels like waking up in a room you've lived in for years and realizing the furniture's all wrong. I smiled despite myself. That's a very specific metaphor. I've had a lot of time to think lately, he said dryly. Another pause settled in, but this one felt different. Less charged. More honest. I want to be clear, I said. I'm not expecting anything from you. I know. And I'm not offended you said something. I'd rather have awkward honesty than whatever the alternative is. Albert nodded slowly. Me too. His phone buzzed on the desk between us. He glanced at it, then flipped it face down without checking. Do you want me to pretend this conversation didn't happen? He asked. The question surprised me more than the confession had. I thought about it. About the way he'd looked standing there. About the fact that I'd noticed his forearms and his voice and his presence long before tonight, even when I told myself not to. No, I said finally. But I don't want it to become something it shouldn't be either. A relieved breath left him. Good. Same. He stood, grabbing his jacket at last. The movement felt like punctuation. A reset. I won't bring it up again unless you do, Albert said. And if at any point this makes you uncomfortable, you say the word. No explanations needed. Okay, I said softly. We walked to the door together. He opened it, the hallway lights spilling back in, normal and safe and mundane. Just before I stepped out, he spoke again. Felix. I turned. For what it's worth, he said, voice quieter now, I'm glad it's you. My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Yeah, I said. Me too. The door closed behind me, and I walked toward the elevator knowing one thing for sure. Nothing had happened. And yet everything had changed. I told myself the weirdness would fade by morning. That I'd wake up, shower, put on my work face, and Albert would be back to being just my boss, the calm, competent, mildly intimidating guy who drank his coffee black and ended meetings early if they got stupid. That's what I told myself. What actually happened was worse. The next morning, I woke up already thinking about him. Not in a dramatic way. Not even physical at first. Just present. Like my brain had decided he now lived there rent-free. I caught myself replaying the sound of his voice when he'd said, I'm glad it's you. And that tight, nervous smile he'd tried to hide right after. By the time I got to the office, I was fully prepared to pretend none of it had happened. Albert ruined that plan in under 5 seconds. Morning, Felix. Same words as always. Same tone. But his eyes lingered just a fraction too long. Like he was checking to see if I was real. Or maybe checking himself. Morning, I replied, keeping it light. We both passed the test. No one around us noticed anything. No sparks. No tension that would set off alarms. And yet, throughout the day, things kept happening that technically meant nothing. Albert stopped by my desk twice. Not unusual, but he leaned a little closer than before. He asked my opinion on a decision he could have made on his own. When I handed him a file, our fingers brushed, and neither of us pulled away immediately. Every time, my body reacted before my brain could catch up. By lunch, I was wound so tight I could barely focus. I escaped to the break room, hoping caffeine would fix whatever this was. I was halfway through stirring my coffee when Albert walked in and closed the door behind him. Not locked, just closed. Okay, he said quietly. This is starting to feel intentional. I froze. What is this? He said, gesturing vaguely between us. The avoiding each other, while very clearly not avoiding each other. I laughed under my breath, more from nerves than humor. You're the one who said you wouldn't bring it up unless I did. Fair, he said, but I also said honesty. So here it is. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, mirroring the posture from the night before. I didn't sleep, he admitted. That got my full attention. Me neither. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or permission. I keep replaying that conversation, he said, trying to figure out if I crossed a line or just finally stopped lying to myself. And I asked, And I don't regret it, he said immediately. Then he paused. But I don't know what to do with it. The air felt thick again, like it had after hours, except now it was broad daylight, and somehow that made it more dangerous. We don't have to do anything, I said carefully. Awareness doesn't automatically mean action. He studied me. Is that how it works for you? I hesitated. Sometimes. Albert nodded slowly. That's what scares me. Why? Because part of me doesn't want this to stay theoretical, he said quietly. My heart thudded hard enough I was sure he could hear it. Before I could respond, there was a knock on the door. Hey, sorry, a coworker's voice called. Am I interrupting? Albert straightened instantly, stepping back like he'd been burned. Nope, just coffee. The door opened. The moment broke, but it didn't disappear. The rest of the day passed in a blur of professionalism layered over something raw and humming underneath. We were careful after that. Too careful. Like two people pretending not to notice a live wire between them. At 5:30, my inbox chimed. Albert, can you stay a minute after work again? My pulse spiked. I stared at the message, then typed back. Me. Is this about reports? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, Albert, no? I shut my laptop slowly. Whatever this was, it wasn't going away. And I had a feeling that the next time the office emptied out, talking wasn't going to be enough anymore. The second time he asked me to stay late, it felt nothing like the first. There was no pretending this was normal. No casual shrug. No half smile tossed over a shoulder. Just a message. One word short of a confession. No. I waited until the office emptied out again, the same way it had the night before. Monitors went dark. Desks abandoned. The low hum of the building settling into its after-hours rhythm. Albert's door was already open when I walked over. Hey, he said. Hey. We stood there for a second, both of us clearly aware that we were doing the same dance as last time, circling the moment before stepping into it. This time, he said, I want you to know you can walk out whenever you want. I nodded. Same goes for you. He closed the door anyway. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just deliberately. Albert didn't sit this time. Neither did I. We stood a few feet apart, the space between us charged in a way that made my skin buzz. I thought about canceling, he admitted. About 10 times. And? I asked. And every time, I imagined you leaving tonight without us saying what we didn't say earlier. He shook his head. I didn't like that version. That honesty hit harder than anything else so far. I need to ask you something, he continued. And I need you to answer honestly, even if it's uncomfortable. Okay. Are you attracted to me? He asked. No manager voice. No joking edge. Just a man asking a question he already suspected the answer to. Yes, I said. I didn't hesitate this time. I have been for a while. Albert closed his eyes briefly, like he was steadying himself. Damn, he muttered. Then he opened them again. Okay. That didn't scare you off? I asked quietly. It scares the hell out of me, he said. But not in a runaway kind of way. He took one step closer, then stopped. I've never done this, he said. Never crossed this line. Never even stood this close to it. I could hear the tension in his voice now, layered with something else, want, maybe, or curiosity that had gone too long without daylight. We don't have to cross anything, I said. We can just acknowledge it. Albert looked at me, really looked at me, like he was memorizing my face. I think acknowledging it is the dangerous part, he said softly. Another step. We were close enough now that I could see the slight shake in his hands, the rise and fall of his chest. Close enough that moving closer or moving away would both mean something. I don't want to hurt you, he said. I know. And I don't want to wake up one day and realize I blew up my life because I didn't think things through. Then don't, I said gently. Thinking is kind of our thing, remember? That earned a breath of a laugh. A real one this time. He lifted his hand slowly, like he was giving me time to stop him. His fingers hovered near my wrist, not touching. Is this okay? He asked. Yes. He touched me then. Just my wrist. Warm. Steady. Intimate in a way that had nothing to do with anything physical and everything to do with intention. The room felt unbearably quiet. Albert didn't pull me in. Didn't rush. He just stood there, holding my wrist like it mattered, like it grounded him. I don't know what this turns into, he said. But I know I don't want to pretend I didn't feel this. Neither do I. We stayed like that for a long moment, no kissing, no lines crossed yet. Just two men standing too close in an office after hours, finally admitting the thing they'd both been circling. Eventually, Albert let go. We should stop here, he said, voice rough. For tonight. I nodded, even though part of me didn't want to. He walked me to the door again. Same hallway. Same lights. Different everything. As I stepped out, he said my name one more time. Felix. Yeah. This isn't a mistake, he said. I don't know what it is yet. But it's not that. I walked to the elevator knowing one thing for certain now. This wasn't just tension anymore. It was choice. After that night, everything became about restraint. Not avoidance restraint. Albert didn't pull back. Neither did I. We just adjusted. Like two people who discovered fire and agreed, very deliberately, not to get burned. We stopped being alone together after hours. Meetings stayed meetings. Conversations stayed professional, at least on the surface. If anyone was watching us, they wouldn't have seen a thing. But under that surface, it was chaos. I noticed him constantly now. The way his voice dropped when he was tired. The crease in his forehead when he was thinking too hard. The way his attention snapped to me in meetings when I spoke, like my opinion had weight beyond the words themselves. And I knew he noticed me too, because sometimes I'd look up and catch him already watching. It wasn't hungry. Not exactly. It was searching, like he was still trying to understand what this thing was and why it existed at all. About a week later, he asked me to walk with him to grab coffee. Not after hours. Not alone in the office. Broad daylight, crowded street, painfully normal. You don't have to, he said immediately. I just figured. We could talk where walls don't echo. I agreed before I could overthink it. We walked in silence at first, shoulder to shoulder, but not touching. The city noise wrapped around us cars. Voices, life happening like nothing inside me was completely upside down. Albert finally broke the quiet. I told my therapist, he said. I nearly stopped walking. You what? He glanced at me, gauging my reaction. Not everything, but enough. And she didn't look shocked, he said, which somehow made it worse. I laughed softly. That's fair. She asked me why I was so sure I had to define it immediately, he continued. Why it scared me more than anything else I've dealt with. I waited. She said maybe it's because this isn't about desire, Albert said slowly. It's about identity and control, and I'm really bad at losing either. I nodded. Yeah, you are. He smirked. Thanks. We got our coffee and sat outside, the small table forcing our knees dangerously close. I was hyper-aware of it. So was he. Neither of us moved. I keep thinking about that night, he said quietly. The way it felt just to touch you, and how that shouldn't have meant as much as it did. It did though, I said. He met my eyes. Yeah, it did. Another pause. This one softer. I don't want this to be a secret that eats us alive, he said. But I also don't want to rush into something I don't understand. So don't rush, I said. But don't pretend either. Albert considered that, then nodded. Okay. That became our unspoken agreement. No secrecy. No lies. Just patience. But patience didn't stop the tension from building. One night, a few days later, we were the last two people in a conference room after a brutal client call. Everyone else filtered out, drained and distracted. Albert stayed seated. So, he said, rubbing his temples. I think we survived that. Barely. He looked at me, something unguarded in his expression. Felix, can I ask you something personal? I hesitated, then nodded. What would this look like, he asked, if we weren't at work? The question landed heavier than any touch ever had. I imagined it him without the title, without the glass walls and expectations. Him just being a man sitting across from me, asking honestly. It would look slower, I said. More awkward. Probably quieter. And real, I added. Albert exhaled, like that was both comforting and terrifying. I don't know when, he said, or how, but I don't think I want to keep pretending this only exists between office hours. My heart kicked up. Me neither. We stood to leave, closer than necessary. For a moment, neither of us moved. Albert's hand brushed mine. This time, neither of us pulled away. And I knew then we weren't just circling the edge anymore. We were approaching the point where choice would turn into action. The line got crossed on a Tuesday. Not dramatically. Not in the heat of some late-night confession or emotional spiral. Just quietly. Inevitably. We were both still in the office past 7, which had become rare on purpose. I was finishing up a presentation, headphones in, when I felt that awareness before the awareness. That sense of being watched. I looked up. Albert was standing in the doorway of my cubicle. He didn't speak, just lifted a finger slightly and motioned toward his office. My stomach flipped. Inside, the lights were dim again, but this time the blinds were open. The city glowed beyond the glass, alive and indifferent. "This isn't about work," he said immediately. I nodded. I figured. He didn't close the door right away. That felt intentional, like he needed to know he could leave it open. "I've been trying to picture the version of me that walks away from this," Albert said. "And I can't." That honesty landed heavier than any confession so far. "I don't want you to feel like you're an experiment," he added. "Or a mistake. Or something I try to understand and then discard." "I don't," I said. "But I need to know this isn't you panicking and grabbing the nearest solid thing." He smiled faintly. "If that were the case, I'd be gripping my desk. Not you." That got my attention. He stepped closer, not rushed, not hesitant. Controlled in the way only someone who'd spent his whole life being controlled could be. "I keep waiting for the part where this fades," he said. "Where I wake up and it's gone. And it's not happening." "It didn't for me either," I admitted. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off him. "Felix," he said quietly, "if I kiss you right now, it's because I want to, not because I'm confused." My pulse was loud in my ears. "Then don't ask," I said. He didn't. The kiss was nothing like I expected. No urgency, no clumsiness, just careful pressure, like he was learning something fragile and important all at once. His hand came up to my jaw, thumb resting there like it belonged. I felt it everywhere. When we pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. He was breathing harder than I was. "Okay," he said hoarsely. "That answers that." I laughed softly. "Yeah, it does." We didn't go further than that. Not then. That somehow made it more intense, not less. Albert stepped back first. "We need rules," he said immediately, brain snapping back online. "Clear ones." I nodded. "Agreed." "No office hours," he continued. "No closed doors at work. No crossing lines that put either of us at risk." "And outside of work?" I asked. His eyes met mine. Steady. Intent. "Outside of work," he said. "I want to see where this goes." We left together that night. Walked out into the city like two men who just happened to be heading the same direction. But when we reached the corner, he stopped. "Dinner," he said. "Tomorrow. Somewhere not corporate." I smiled. "I'd like that." He hesitated, then leaned in and kissed me again, quick, soft, unmistakably real. Then he stepped back, hands in his pockets, watching me walk away like he was committing the image to memory. I got home wired and exhausted and smiling like an idiot. Because whatever this was now, it wasn't theoretical anymore. Our first date didn't feel like a date. Not at first. It felt like two men who'd spent weeks holding their breath, finally remembering how to breathe again. Albert picked a small place a few neighborhoods away, warm lights, scratched wooden tables, the kind of restaurant where no one cared who you were as long as you tipped well. No suits, no office talk, no glass walls. He showed up in jeans and a simple jacket, hair still damp like he'd just showered and hadn't overthought it too much. I noticed anyway. "You look different," I said as we sat down. He smiled, a little self-conscious. "So do you." We ordered drinks. Talked about nothing for the first 10 minutes. Movies. Food. A mutual hatred of pretentious menus. It was easy in a way I hadn't expected. Then Albert grew quiet. "I almost canceled again," he admitted. I raised an eyebrow. "You've got to stop telling me that." "I know," he said, smiling. "But it feels important." "Why?" "Because I'm realizing something," he said slowly. "Every time I think about backing out, it's not because I don't want this. It's because I want it more than I'm comfortable admitting." That honesty still hit me right in the chest every time. "I've spent most of my life being certain," Albert continued. "Certain about who I am, what I want, what makes sense." He swirled the ice in his glass. "This doesn't make sense. And yet, it feels grounded. Not chaotic." "That's because it's not a phase," I said gently. "It's just a part of you you never had to look at before." He nodded. "Yeah, and you're the reason I'm looking at it now." That could have felt like pressure. Instead, it felt like trust. We walked after dinner, the night cool and quiet, hands brushing occasionally like accidents we both allowed. At one point, Albert stopped under a streetlight and turned to me. "Can I do something incredibly unprofessional?" he asked. I smiled. "You're off the clock." He kissed me again, longer this time, deeper, still unhurried. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine the same way he had in his office. "I don't regret this," he said. "Good," I replied. "Because neither do I." We didn't go home together that night. That surprised both of us. Instead, we stood there a little longer, then laughed awkwardly, then went our separate ways like two people deliberately choosing not to rush something fragile. At work the next day, everything was different. Not tense, not awkward, just aware. We were careful, professional, but there was warmth now. A quiet understanding that passed between us in meetings and hallways, in glances that said later instead of never. A week later, Albert texted me from his couch. Albert, I told my ex. I stared at the message. Me, how did that go? A pause. Then, Albert, better than I expected. Worse than I hoped. Still worth it. My chest tightened. Me, I'm proud of you. Another pause. Albert, I don't think I could have done it without you. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a secret, even just between us. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple, but it was real. And as I lay in bed that night, phone warm in my hand, I realized something important. This story hadn't been about my straight boss discovering attraction. It had been about two men choosing honesty over comfort. And that choice? It was only just beginning. The first time Albert came over to my place, it wasn't planned. Not really. It was raining, one of those steady, soaking rains that made the city feel smaller, quieter. We'd gone out for dinner again, something casual, and when we stood outside the restaurant saying goodbye, neither of us moved to leave. I don't really want to be alone tonight, he said, not looking at me. Neither did I. So we walked to my apartment, shoulders brushing, the decision already made without being spoken aloud. Inside, things were gentle. We talked first, sat on opposite ends of the couch with shoes still on, like teenagers pretending this wasn't a big deal. Albert told me things he'd never said out loud before about the pressure he'd always felt to be certain, about how being a husband had made sense even when it stopped feeling right, about how confusing it was to realize that attraction didn't follow the rules he'd lived by. I listened. That, more than anything, seemed to undo him. When we finally kissed, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't explosive. It was slow and grounding and full of intent, like both of us understood exactly what we were choosing. Later, when we lay there together, rain tapping against the windows, Albert stared at the ceiling for a long moment. You know, he said, I spent years thinking self-knowledge meant having answers. I turned toward him. And now I think it means being willing to ask better questions. Work didn't implode. The world didn't end. We told HR carefully, professionally, on our terms. Albert stepped back from directly managing me. It was inconvenient and a little awkward and absolutely worth it. There were hard days, doubts, moments when Albert pulled inward, scared of what this meant for his kids, his past, his sense of self. And there were moments when I wondered what it said about me to fall for someone in the middle of such a shift. But every time we checked in with each other, really checked in, the answer was the same. This wasn't reckless. It was deliberate. Months later, someone at work joked about Albert being the most predictable straight guy alive, and he just smiled into his coffee and didn't correct them. He didn't need to, because some truths aren't about labels or announcements. They're about who you choose to go home to. And the night my absolutely straight boss asked me to stay late, it turned out he wasn't asking for extra time at work at all. He was asking for the courage to stop pretending. And somehow, without meaning to, I'd found the courage too.